Let's get started. Chris, we've got Chris from Oventus Medical. Chris will allow questions just to be typed throughout, which I'll ask at the end. But I'll hand it straight over to you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good on you. Thanks, Simon, and thanks everyone for joining. Disclaimer, obviously. So Oventus Medical, we're a medical device company in the sleep apnea space, based in Brisbane, but launching in North America and Australia at the moment. We have limited time, so I'll move through an overview of obstructive sleep apnea pretty quickly in the market opportunity. I'll drill down a little bit on our lab-in-lab business model, and then importantly, explain how we're trading through the COVID-19 pandemic and what opportunities are presented as a result of that for us. So obstructive sleep apnea, you stop breathing multiple times a night. The obstructions can be in the nose, the soft palate, the lateral wall, the throat, the tongue base, leads to daytime sleepiness, reduced effectiveness, increased risk of accident, long-term comorbidities such as hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, depression. So massive cost of the economy, $150 billion, the US was the first diagnosed. So huge health and economic issues. The standard of care is CPAP. The problem with CPAP is...
Chris, will you just turn your video off and just use audio only?
Yep, no problem. Just give me a second.
Are you talking now? Yeah, that's good.
I am now. Can you hear me okay?
That's perfect.
Yep, great. So CPAP, the reverse vacuum cleaner with a fighter pilot mask, we know that it works, but it's not often well tolerated for a whole host of reasons. It's uncomfortable, it's uncool, it's not portable, air leaks, it wakes up the bed partner, it's an imposition in the bedroom. More than half of people quit CPAP at the end of the first year, and that's out of the ones that actually take one home. So out of 100 patients diagnosed, 35 refuse it outright, 65 will trial it, 50 will take it home, and half of them stop using it the first year. So at the end of 1 year, only about 25% of patients are done. One of the main reasons that both standard mouth guards and CPAP don't work is because of nasal obstruction. Blocked nose leads to higher pressures, a full face mask, and patients' inability to tolerate CPAP. And a blocked nose leads to mouth breathing, which also causes the failure of a standard mouth guard. I was one of those patients, so I invented the device for myself. We incorporated a 3D printed airway within the device that allows patients to breathe below the nose and soft palate obstruction that could occur, stabilising the tongue and reducing the negative pressure swings or the collapsibility of the airway. We've done 4 clinical studies, over 200 patients. We've shown that, including the airway in the device, bypassing nasal obstruction and soft palate collapse while stabilising the tongue improves efficacy 20% and success rates 20%. And then we have a second level valve that we add into the airway as well, which is like a little flapper valve. You can see it on the right hand side of the screen there, and that increases success rates up to 80% compared to 50% for a standard mouth guard. And that's a randomized crossover study and using the P valve as a salvage for any patients who didn't succeed on the O2 Van Optima. So we have the single most successful treatment on market at the moment, and it's the only device that can treat the entire airway. CPAP actually causes nasal obstruction. Nasal obstruction is the main reason for treatment failure in CPAP and oral appliance. So we've taken the problem, which is nasal obstruction and mouth breathing, and we've turned that into the solution. So we rearranged the upper airway physiology. Market opportunity is $2 billion for Oventus in the US. There are 3 million patients now that are outside of care. So there's over 30 million patients in the US for sleep apnea. 6 million have been diagnosed and 50% of them are outside of care. If we were to sell each one a device today, that would be a $2 billion opportunity. And again, we have the most effective product on the market for over 80% of patients. So why aren't oral appliances used more often? The main reason is variable efficacy. So if you say to a sleep doc, why don't you use oral appliances? They'll say, well, they don't always work. Well, we've now increased that success rate from 50-50 up to over 80%. In fact, when sleep docs see that, they say, that's brilliant. Why don't we start with that and use CPAP later? How do we get our patients into care? Well, the next issue is a complex patient journey. Historically, they've had to go through referrals between primary care physicians, sleep labs, sleep tests, dentists, back to the sleep physician. Patients generally fall out of care, and then there's a lack of communication or siloing of professions where patients also fall through the cracks. Additionally, we have a competing economic imperative. If we ask the sleep doc, why don't you do more oral appliances? They'll say, well, the patient walks out the door, the dentist will charge them $2,000 or $3,000 and I'll never see them again. And the dentist says, well, if I do more sleep, except every time I refer to a sleep physician, I never see them again, they end up on CPAP. So the technology we have is what excited the sleep docs. They wanted to treat their patients with it. And what we've done with the lab-in-lab model is we've been able to bring more patients into care by delivering our technology now within the sleep facility. So instead of the patient leaving the sleep facility to try and find a CPAP trial at a durable medical equipment distributor, maybe passing, maybe failing, seeing Dr. Google, trying to find a dentist, going back for a new prescription, going to see a dentist, maybe they get a device, maybe they don't, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. All that happens now is the sleep doc says, you know what, you could have CPAP, or actually this new O2 vent would work really well for you. And if you'd like one, you can pop next door and get scanned. And so at the moment, we have scans across the country, scanners across the country where the sleep physicians are prescribing our device, the O2 vent Optima. They're being scanned on site and treated on site. So now we have a very simple patient care model, all delivered at the point of care and in collaboration with the sleep physicians and the dentist. They're working together for the first time. Importantly, the device is also reimbursed under existing CPT codes for commercial payers, and just recently we've also received approval to bill the government for any patients who use Medicare to pay for their healthcare. And that's a really important point, which I'll go through more when I talk about the response to COVID-19. So what's driving adoption? We've got the best technology. It's a simple treatment journey, and we're sharing the care between the dentist and the sleep physician, and also the revenue. So for the first time, the dentist and the sleep physician can share the clinical outcome and can increase profits as well by adopting this technology. We have everyone aligned, from the sleep physician to the dentist to the patient. It's a collaborative framework where everybody wins. We launched this even before we had FDA clearance on the O2 vent Optima. We had 2 groups contracts signed ahead of approval. Since then, it's been very rapid. We have 59 groups discussions, 12 groups under NDA. We've issued contracts to a further 8, and we've contracted 11 across 43 sites. And that's just continued to grow. Even since this update a few weeks ago, we have more groups in the funnel. But that would be $40 million annualized on the minimum devices that are within our agreements across that deal funnel. So it's a significant opportunity. So what's happened since COVID-19? I was on a roadshow as this all broke. So I thought it was important to explain to everyone how we're responding to what opportunities there are for Oventus within the current environment. This is where we were. So we went from July to 15 sites contracted to 29 in November and 43 in February, with 14 sites launched and 10 in the implementation funnel. Since then, we've continued to negotiate contracts. We don't see any slowing down in contract negotiations. We're continuing to launch sites. Our team has done a phenomenal job. Instead of going on site to start the launch process, we're doing that remotely. We're lining up all the training and implementation. We're identifying patients with them via telehealth ahead of launch, and then we're scheduling and doing insurance verification before it's launched as well. So we are able to trade through on contract negotiations and signing, as well as launching sites without having to go on site until first live patient treatment. So we saw this patient flow building through to February. And the sites we have, the sites we've launched, the 14 sites, if we get those to 20 devices per month, which is the contract minimum, which we give them 3 to 6 months to get to, we'd be at $3 million annualized revenue. The ones that we have contracted are capable of generating $10 million revenue, annualized revenue. The patient flow was building quickly before March. We were truncated in March, unfortunately. But currently, we are scheduling patients in April at the moment, and patient flow is looking very encouraging. I was just looking at the numbers before this meeting with the team, and through our telehealth initiative, which we launched with our sleep group partners just last week, in conjunction with them and working with them, we're scheduling patients for scans as soon as April, and those books are building quite nicely. So we will have had a small drop-off in March, but we're starting to build again through April, and we think by the end of the June quarter, we should be tracking pretty well. So at the moment, instead of having a face-to-face consultation, the sleep physician will identify a patient, they'll schedule them for a telehealth consult with us. We'll do the telehealth consult, we'll verify their insurance, inform them of any copay, and then book them for a scan ready for treatment. So we're reducing the lead time to revenue by doing that. And it's actually so efficient, we've increased conversion rates and reduced costs. So that will actually be a permanent change to the workflow for us. So recent developments. Last week, the American Dental Association limited treatment to essential treatment only due to COVID-19. The US Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced that telemedicine coverage will be expanded so that we can start to treat patients via telehealth and telemedicine that are at risk of COVID-19 or spreading COVID-19. And that started pretty much straight away. The sleep physicians pivoted very quickly in that, and we actually supported them through that process. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine published some data, although it was limited, that there could be a risk of increased spread using CPAP. And the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine advised that decisions to provide oral appliance therapy when CPAP can't be used should be made on a case-by-case basis. So we have a scenario where the AASM is cautioning the use of CPAP if there's risk of COVID-19 spread. The American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine is saying that you can treat patients because airway management can be life-saving. It's on a case-by-case basis. And what we have to remember is that oral health is subject to standard precautions anyway for all pathogens. So the precautions we take to prevent spread of HIV, AIDS, Hep A, B, C, influenza, or other viruses apply to COVID-19. So there's no reason why in these situations where a patient is at risk that we can't continue to deliver care following standard precautions, subject to the guidelines of the home shelter and working with our partners then. We have worked with them and other providers of medical care. They've all switched rapidly to telehealth as their main platform to engage in patients, and we've done the same. It's actually, COVID-19's provided a cultural shift that's made telehealth more acceptable to patients, and it's actually supported now by stakeholders, including the FDA and insurers. Sleep groups are continuing to identify and schedule patients via telehealth, and we're providing online and remote assistance to the sleep specialists to manage the patient journey with additional telehealth consultations, online patient intake, insurance verification, and then we schedule them for a scan for fitting of an O2 and Optima. We're now scheduling new and existing patients in the next quarter, starting in April. If home sheltering and social distancing make attending the facility a challenge, we're fast tracking our home care model. It was already in late stage development for home care businesses who go into homes with CPAP, and we're launching it next quarter if it is required. I think that's a really exciting development in that now we can manage the diagnosis, consultation and prescription remotely. We can go to their homes to scan, the device can be delivered to home, and the fitting appointment could be done by telehealth as well. This is right in line with a lot of sleep lab workflow now and DME workflow. And if you couple that with our PDAC approval to build a government, particularly covering those that are vulnerable to COVID-19, so our older population, what we have there is a scenario where we can have them diagnosed remotely, we can treat them in their home, and the government is paying for the therapy with automatic pre-authorization. We think there's a significant opportunity for Oventus, and we're very excited about this extension of our lab-in-lab program. We had planned to launch it sometime this year. We've just brought that forward. I think that's going to be a big opportunity for us. AEROFLOW is a great partner. So AEROFLOW are already using telehealth and remotely fitting patients with CPAP. They have nurse practitioners and respiratory therapists who are doing telehealth to help patients with their care. All we're doing is adding our device into their existing workflow, combined with some home scanning, as well as they are subcontracting their head contracts through their sleep lab partners nationally. So partnering with AEROFLOW, with PDAC approval, with our telehealth plan and our home care extension of our lab-in-lab program, we think we're incredibly well positioned to come through COVID-19 and to really profit on the other side of it as well. And importantly, help the millions of patients that are suffering from sleep apnea that are at risk of COVID-19 and that otherwise will not be able to be treated. So we think that's a really exciting development for Oventus and for the patients that we're treating and the sleep partners we're working with. We've also implemented significant cost savings measures. We're preserving capital. We'll have at least 6 months runway at the end of the quarter. We continue to negotiate and launch sites. We're continuing to schedule patients. The systems are great. The team's been brilliant. They really have pivoted quickly to enable telehealth and now home care as well. We have enormous demand for the lab-in-lab program. It continues to build, and in fact, the macro environment is encouraging sleep groups to engage with us more quickly to try to recover some of that lost ground that they've had from COVID-19. Our virtual phone consultations and forward scheduling are looking very strong. We will see a near-term slowdown in revenue growth, but we will still be growing revenue. We'll have a solid revenue growth in booked revenue this quarter, and we would expect to see increasing growth through the back end of the year and next quarter as well, particularly as we work with our lab-in-lab partners to help them recover lost revenues in the current macro situation and to bring all those patients into the care who otherwise may not have been able to be treated. So we're very excited about that. We've got a great board. We have limited time. I won't dig down, but we have a phenomenal board and great support on both sides of the pond, our US directors and our Australian directors. We have an amazing team in the US and in Australia. The US team's helping us launch over here, but the support from the Australian team has also been phenomenal. Brilliant advisory board, some of the most respected people in the industry in the US and worldwide. Obviously, the share price has come off with many others. We still have a good runway. We have cash in the bank, 6 months runway at the end of this quarter. We're growing revenues. We've controlled costs. We have a low forward burn rate, and we have a massive funnel of demand for our product and for our lab and lab program. It's very tightly held still, founders and top 20 shareholders, around about 60%, remaining shareholders at 40%. Invest now is technically validated and clinically validated. There's a massive need with no clinical trial risk. We're at commercialisation. There's demonstrated adoption, and we're building revenues. We'll continue to build revenues. We're agile, and we've responded quickly to COVID-19. Our home care represents a new market opportunity with Medicare funding in place, a great national distributor in the US, and a huge funnel of contracts coming through. The barriers to trade in the US have been removed. So we think that we're well positioned to continue to trade and to profit and prosper on the other side of COVID-19. Just some words from our patients, and they're who we look after first and foremost. That's who we're trying to treat, and without them we wouldn't get the success that we do. And we're very pleased that we've had phenomenal feedback of our O2 Van Optima in market.